Good afternoon, welcome to Rapid plus TCT Live. I'm Daniel O'Connor, the group editor of TCT magazine, and with me is Mark Cotteleer. Right.
Yep, that's perfect.
Can you just start by introducing yourself and what it is you do at Deloitte?
Sure. My name is Mark Cotteleer. I am a research director at Deloitte, so I lead the teams that create the perspectives and intelligence that we share with our clients around issues like additive manufacturing, of course, Internet of Things, Industry 4.0, future of mobility, generally those topics that cross industries that have to do with how we extract value from technology and its application in organizations.
And during your address this morning, you talked a lot about the AM capability building blocks and the digital thread. Can you tell us more about that? Give us a brief overview.
Sure. So when we look at the additive manufacturing space, we're very excited about the technologies that are available. And so as we walk on the floor here at Rapid, we see a tremendous amount of innovation in terms of things like materials and machines. But we also realize that in order to bring value from those technologies, we have to have capabilities to use them. It's sort of like, a hammer's no good unless you have someone who can swing it and drive a nail. And so we look to things like quality and the business case, but also things like organizational processes and the business model, and this notion of the digital thread, which is where our big commitment is, at least for the next year or so. The digital thread we define as that single strand of data that stretches from cradle to grave, from the original design conception of a product all the way through production, through test and validate, and ultimately through the deliver and monitor stage where we track what is happening to that product in the real world and then feed that back, hopefully into a design cycle that allows us to improve and continue to add value for our customers. So it's really it's an integration play around all of the different technologies that you need to make that machine in the middle actually work.
And it was mentioned yesterday about all of those technologies creating Industry 4.0 factories and things like this. How much of an effect do you think that's going to have on the supply chain, and do you think that people are ready for it?
Oh, well, two great questions. We think that the opportunity for additive manufacturing to impact supply chains, irrespective of what products are produced, is really going to be profound. We're doing a tremendous amount of work with very large organizations that are focused on their sustainment operations, things like long-tail inventory, and the ability to use additive manufacturing, even if you're producing a spare part. That's not the sexy element of additive manufacturing, but even if you're producing a simple spare part, to be able to do that on demand and on location represents an opportunity to shift supply chains in ways that could add profound value both for organizations and for their customers.
Do you think that will have an effect on jobs? I mean, if we talk about a spare part, you've got the manufacture of it, you've got the storage of it, you've got the shipping of it, and things like that. And if you'll be able to print on demand a spare part, how do you think that will affect jobs?
We look at additive manufacturing as part of the overarching Industry 4.0 space. That is this collision of digital and physical technologies in ways that the notion of Industry 4.0 is a fourth industrial revolution. And as with previous industrial revolutions, we can reasonably expect there's going to be some dislocations, and we don't take that for granted. But I think the other thing we have to point out is that every industrial revolution that we've seen historically has created more jobs than it's destroyed. So for an individual, there's no question that or for an organization, there's no question that individuals and individual organizations could face challenges. But overall, we're pretty bullish on the opportunities that this is going to create for what we call the future of work. That is to redesign the workforce to create higher value-adding jobs for individuals as we move into the future. So the short answer is we're pretty bullish, actually.
With names like Deloitte and Siemens and GE validating the market, there was obviously a huge hype around 3D printing at the start of this decade. Do you think that in any way, shape or form had a positive impact? We talk about the negative side of it, but
I think that any time we create an opportunity for people to know, I'm a former professor, right? So I'm all about learning, and any time we create an opportunity for people to learn more, that's a good thing. I do think that, as with other technologies, we've gone through a little bit of a hype cycle. We've seen that, for example, in the market, in the stock market, with capitalization levels going way up and then coming down and now recovering a little bit. And so I think that we are now in a stage where organizations are really starting to feel like, well, two things. One is the technology and the capability set around the technology is maturing to the point where we can add real value. And two, a little bit of a realization creeping in there that if we don't get started, someone else is, and that could be dangerous for us. I mean, if you want to talk about dislocation, if someone creates the opportunity to serve your customers from a spare part perspective or from a product perspective in a way that you can't, they may not be your customer for very much longer.
And in your opinion, do you think that anywhere is ahead in the world? Any specific region is ahead when it comes to the fourth industrial revolution?
Well, the concept of Industry 4.0 was invented in Europe, in Germany, and so there is a keen sensitivity, I think, in Europe for this space. And so I would say if I had to pick a global region that is in front, I'd have to go with Europe. Clearly, there's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm here in the U.S. We talk about things like the digital manufacturing enterprise and digital supply networks that is using these technologies to shift the way we create and add value and deliver value. So lots of excitement there. And of course, you can't ignore what's going on in Asia with lots of pop-up organizations that are bringing these technologies to the field and trying to add value in their own way. So a lot of global energy, probably the most in Europe, but I think that other regions are not far behind. And I would add one other thing, that coming out of the Middle East, we see a lot of enthusiasm in some Middle Eastern countries to use this as a way to diversify their technology platforms as well.
And do you think that's having a positive impact on places like Pittsburgh? So I'm from the UK. There's Sheffield in the UK, which was our steel city. Yeah. Sheffield's really having a rejuvenation at the moment thanks to these technologies because people want the workforce that was previously using metals, specifically in the metals. Yeah. It's great to see a rejuvenation thanks to additive technologies.
Yeah, I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, another classic industrial town, used to be called the machine shop of the world, and that has suffered from job loss as manufacturing moved globally. I'm actually very excited as a citizen and as someone who watches this industry, because what we're seeing is we talk about a reduction, the idea of a reduction in minimum efficient scale, because we can put these technologies to work. And we recognize that production wants to locate close to demand. And the reason that it doesn't is because economically it can't, because you've got so much capital that you've got to invest. So if we can reduce capital with these technologies employed, then we reduce minimum efficient scale and production can scatter back to the source of demand where it wants to be. And last time I checked, the United States had the largest demand pool in the world, and each of these communities has large demand pools of their own. So the opportunity to bring those jobs back and to establish small, medium, and large organizations that rely on those technologies, we think we have real optimism for that.
I can imagine that some of the companies that you deal with are excited by the convergence of all these technologies, so the Internet of Things, so we're bringing up more data, and then additive technologies on top of that, and things like generative design. Is that something that, is the digital thread about tying those things together?
It is. It's about, and again, when we talk about the digital thread, we talk about cradle to grave, design through end of life, and it is precisely the ability to create that model, think about a 3D model, and all of the technical data that goes around it, and then to use that as the single source of truth within the organization about how we're going to produce something, so that we're not playing that proverbial game of telephone where I whisper something to you and you to your friend and them to their friend, and at the end of the chain, we've got a totally different message. So we're eliminating mistakes, we're improving quality, we're speeding throughput, and integrating these various technologies. And so, for example, we've just built a prototype at Deloitte of the digital thread with Siemens PLM, and I saw it for the first time 2 weeks ago, and I have to tell you, I was blown away by what you can imagine happening with the integrations of these technologies. It's just fabulous.
And obviously we've got a lot of new technologies on the RAPID TCT show floor. How do trade shows help educate and help bring the...
Well, so let's go back to the idea that that I'm a former professor, right, and that information is generally a good thing. And so the opportunity for folks to come together at RAPID, which really there is no other additive manufacturing assemblage of this scale that's available to folks. So to bring the people together that are providing the equipment and that are providing the materials and that are providing the sim and that are providing the engineering change and that are providing the digital thread, to bring all those people together and to mix them with the academics that are here and the service providers that are here is a tremendous opportunity. So I think that RAPID has probably done as much to advance additive manufacturing in the U.S. certainly as anything else, because it's a place where you can come and see. And it's still a pretty small market, so there aren't that many opportunities to come and see.
And on that very positive note, I think we'll end the conversation there. Thank you very much, Mark.
Terrific. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you.